What's up, guys? This is Messenger of the Cross at Pulse Point Media. I'm just coming to you today with some pictures here that show and illustrate something very troubling to my spirit, troubling to my heart, but at the same time, many of us who are real targeted individuals who are chosen by God and have this calling on our lives by the Holy Spirit have come to learn, as Jesus leads us into all truth and guides us into all truth and brings to our remembrance all the things that he's spoken unto us. And, through the course of my time of being targeted, poisoned, being made to be homeless, losing jobs, losing friends, losing money, losing my own standing, my reputation, just all the tactics of abuse and control that they do, the directed speech, the gaslighting, the provoking, the pushing for a reaction, pushing for a breakdown, the involvement of law enforcement. And I could go on and on about how I've been pursued for the last 25 years and come to find out that a family member is involved in this type of group and organization. And you can see, I'm talking about the Freemason group, and you can see their aprons. And this is my brother right here, my brother Chris. And, it's just a tragedy when I look at this and see how much Christ has done for me, even when I have nothing, yet I possess all things, and being poor, yet I make many rich, having nothing. And, the supernatural power of God can work in our lives. And yet so many of our family members are envious, they're jealous, and they can only compare and compete in a collapse and control game as they go after and hide the abuse and go after our basic common resources, the things that make for a life, autonomy, independence, and even our identity. They would steal it. They would take it if they could. And they're always trying to get a breakdown, always trying to get a collapse. And then when we react to that, then they can say we're crazy, we're mentally ill, we don't see clearly, because that's really what all abusers say. But I'm coming to you today as a Christian. I'm letting people know that that's my position. That's where I stand, is with Christ. And, I've been a Christian for the last 25 years and just about the same amount of time that I've been targeted. Go figure. But, I believe that Jesus Christ sets people free because he did it with me. And he set me free from fear. He set me free from secrecy. He set me free that I wouldn't have to strive and try to earn an identity when Christ has become my identity, and he wants us to know that. Free from needing to climb, in other words, those ladders to feel worthy. Christ gives what no ritual, no degree, no secret oath could ever give you. And that is an eternal identity. That is forgiveness. That is light. That is truth. That is freedom. And when I see my brother, entering a system built on secrecy, on hidden knowledge, on ritualized belonging, I feel a deep ache in my spirit and have to speak out, even after the coordinated and organized effort to try to destroy my life and to hide that abuse and to agree together that it's okay to ruin and wreck my life. But thank God there's that Bible verse that says God builds upon the ruins, because anything that replaces Christ, even subtly, is always lesser. It's always counterfeit, and it's always dangerous. And there is such a deep contrast I'm seeing as I grow in my calling between me and my family members, and can see why God protected me and why God hid me in the secret place of the Most High and taught me how to abide under the shadow of the Almighty. But I can show the contrast, not to shame people, but to help my family see what I see. Christianity for me is open, but the tradecraft of Freemasonry and all the different tradecraft that they do is a hidden thing. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. But tradecraft of the Freemasons basically says, say nothing unless the group allows it. Christianity is the truth. And the Freemason tradecraft is so much layered meaning. Jesus spoke plainly, but the tradecraft of Freemasons uses symbolic codes and dual meanings. Christianity is freedom, and tradecraft is oath binding. it's really oath binding. And that is the bondage that, that I'm speaking about. And it's Christ that wants to break these chains in the generational curses that are in our family. Tradecraft creates them, but Christianity gives us our identity, and our identity is Christ. But tradecraft of the Freemasons assigns degrees, and in Christ, you are fully accepted. But in the Freemason movement, you climb for that acceptance. And Christianity is the light. Christ is the light. But tradecraft is just a shadow. The practices of the Freemasons, you never get a hold of the actual reality, which is Christ. It just is another route that is the broad way. But Jesus says, let nothing be hidden, and that in the last days, nothing will be hidden, and every secret, every hidden thing is going to come out into the open and be revealed. And that's really how I discovered that my brother is a Freemason. And, the tradecraft that he practices is to protect the secrets at all cost. My brother can't understand that he's, in this danger and is blinded by arrogance and pride and desire and wanting to be something that he's not. But the world of Christianity and the world of Freemasonry doesn't mix, and it can't mix. So why the fictional life that my brother lives? Here I stand just trying to bring about a sincere perspective. And I'm not saying that everybody is evil. I'm saying that the structure of what he's a part of is spiritually unsafe. And the lodge functions like a cult because it contains initiation rituals, secret oaths, hierarchical degrees, symbolic identities, controlled knowledge, loyalty enforced through silence, and a worldview built on esoteric writings instead of Jesus Christ. So it is a cult, and it's not defined by its name. It's defined by its architecture. So when I see my brother joining something like this, to be a part of something like this, it's really a tragedy and makes me groan in my spirit and makes me ache in my spirit, on top of all the things that they're willing to do to sacrifice a family member, and all to step on us as a pedestal so that they can be something that they're not, so they can have things that don't belong to them. And so the architecture of the lodge is built on secrecy. It's built on symbolism. It's built on ritual. It's built on hierarchy and hidden truth. And these are the very things that, Jesus Christ warns us to avoid and warns us to be against. But it's not a plea out of fear, but it's a plea of love. I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody. I'm trying to protect my blind brother from going down a path that he knows so little about. And it is a hijacking of your soul, of your freedom, of your identity to Satan, your clarity, your connection to the truth. You don't need a ritual to belong. You don't need a degree to be enlightened. You don't need a symbol to be powerful. You don't need a brotherhood to be valued. Christ gives you all of that. And freely, openly, without secrecy, without oaths, and without hidden meetings. But there is this cult-like pattern, and especially coming from a family with a mother who's a covert, malignant, sadistic narcissist, who always does under what's required, who is absent all the time, emotionally, mentally, and can only collapse and control the very resources that were meant for my brothers and take them up and devour them, all for the sake of getting bad reactions so that she can feed her ego. But this is the danger. It's joining a cult like this because he never had, family growing up. And of course, I'm the scapegoat, and my mom has manipulated him into thinking that I'm the cause, that I'm to blame, as she hides the abuse and plays this double standard of abuse and above the law status to do whatever she wants at the sacrifice of all the men in my family. She sacrificed my connection to my father and my brothers because she couldn't share the attention. And that is the problem. But, this is really a plea. When a group asks you to swear secrecy, to hide the truth, to protect the group above outsiders, to advance through hidden knowledge, it's not a harmless club. It's a cult pattern. And even if people inside don't see it, and cult patterns always divide families. They always isolate members. They always create dual identities. They always replace scripture with symbolism, and replacing Christ with ritual and symbolism. They replace Christ with 100% ritual and replace freedom with obligation. And I didn't want that for family members, but because of the envy and the insecurity, all they can do is compare and compete. And I keep telling them, in the past, that the Lord Jesus has freely blessed me because the blood has been shed. He died on a cross for us. And now out of those riches, out of his person, we can freely receive everything that he has won for us. But I never wanted this for my family. But I wanted to break down really quick how, the Freemason movement mirrors the same tradecraft that you see in law enforcement. And for me, I've had law enforcement involved in my life since I was young. My mom, she was an expert at playing the victim and putting me in the middle and throwing me under the bus in very abusive ways to try to get a bad reaction. And when you give that bad reaction, that becomes the evidence. And they are able to manipulate and triangulate third parties and everyone else around you to do their bidding, to do the abuse for them as they hide behind the person that they're manipulating, smirking, smiling, shrugging their shoulders like, what are you going to do about it? Rolling their eyes. But that is the part that concerns me. It's the same tradecraft the Freemasons used in the lodges is the same tradecraft used in modern policing. It's all about the brotherhood, being above outsiders. The lodge protects the brotherhood at all costs, but the police protect the department at all costs. There is so much symbolic identity. The lodge uses aprons and compasses, but the police use patches and badges. There is this hierarchy advancement. This Freemason movement, the lodges all across America use degrees to advance, and the police use ranks. So there's all sorts of flaws with this movement, but this internal secrecy is the problem. Offer up family members to get ahead, to get where you want to be in life, and exclude Christ. You don't need to repent. You don't need to turn to God and humble yourself. You just can go through the rituals and get what you want when you want it at the expense of others. And so the lodge is all about secrecy. What happens in the lodge stays in the lodge, in other words. The police are really much the same way. The blue line of silence, the blue wall of silence. So there's so much controlled knowledge, and that Christ wants to set us free from. This idea that knowledge is controlled by degrees, and you can't know what, the higher degrees know and have come to understand, when Christ is not about any of that. There's higher degrees to know the truth in the lodge. And with police, there's only higher ranks, and those alone know the full picture about what's going on in the department. So there's so much ritualized entry. The lodge has initiation, and the police have academy rights, but it's public image versus internal reality. And that is the problem, isn't it? The lodge has charity outwardly in the community, but secrecy inwardly. The police have community policing outwardly and internal loyalty above all else inwardly. So when policing adopts this fraternal tradecraft, it becomes a closed fraternity with badges. And that should be a concern for all of us, because justice must be transparent. Authority must be accountable. People must be humble, and trust must be open. The tradecraft of Freemasons, whether in a lodge or a precinct at the police department, teaches the exact opposite. So I'm not asking, for people to reject others. I'm asking for them to reject systems that do these type of things. They pull you away from the light of Christ. You were made for the truth. You were made for freedom. You were made for Christ. And so come back to the light. That's my plea for all my family members. Come back to the truth. Come back to the one who needs no symbols, no rituals, no degrees, no secrecy, only your heart. And that is the key with all of this. So we can see through these pictures that I'm showing right now. This is in Wayzata. This is the Freemason group that he's a part of in Minnesota. And I circled the Master Mason, at least. I think that's the Master Mason with the top hat on. And you've got, the aprons and all the ritual symbols and all the group together in Wayzata. And again, this is my brother right here. This is the one who has coordinated and agreed together to sensationalize me, to lie about me, to slander me, and at any cost, at any price. It doesn't matter as long as he gets what he wants. And what he wants is it all. He wants to be something that he's not, and he wants to give himself over to satanic powers just for temporary glory, for temporary satisfaction, so that he doesn't have to be targeted. He doesn't have to go through what he's put me through and what my family has put me through as members of this secret society. But, I'm just showing that here he is right here standing and, smiling and smirking as he sabotages and ruins and competes and compares and destroys his brother's life. And so many of us have these people in our family. And really, we grew up in a narcissistic home where there was no real genuine connection and no real genuine, authentic love and presence. There was just duty. There was just following roles. And those roles were fake. Those roles were just an act, just a performance, like one of the many identities that my mother takes or that my brothers take. And it's all about pathological lying. It's all about hiding the truth and keeping the truth from ever being known. And from the time I was young, my brother agreed together in a coordinated way to participate and be an enabler of the abuser in our family, which is my mother, who is very satanic, very dark, and only can lie pathologically, only can play the victim act like a puppet, making these other men in my family like puppets as she would play the victim and get them to do whatever she wanted without question. And it's all about putting you in the middle, isn't it? To compete over the attention, guys. It's all about putting you in the middle and making you fight for the narcissist and over the narcissist, of course, because they need to be the center of attention always. And when that's not happening, there is a collapse, there is a control game, and that control game ends up eliminating and annihilating the one who sees. And I just so happen to be the scapegoat in the family, the one who sees, the one who breaks generational curses, the one who breaks the tradecraft, the one who breaks the control games, and the one who is set free by Christ. So I just wanted to show this with my brother, and I circled the Freemason square and compass and symbol, and then I circled my brother so people can see this is one of my perps. And sad to say that my family members have agreed to participate and have sensationalized me, going around slandering me, getting the police to hunt me by every town I move in, calling the local sheriff's office, pretending that I'm dangerous, that I'm violent, that I'm, that they're victims of me in order to drive this narrative and to drive this story and to drive this control game that's really about power and control. So I love you guys. When I was young, I grew up in a family that was highly narcissistic, and especially on my mom's side, never dealing with the pain, avoiding, pretending that reality isn't reality, and always acting as a filter between me and reality, between me and relationships, between me and things, and acting as a gatekeeper in a competition game to win and lose at any cost, at any price. So there are many things growing up that were done to me that I've never even spoken about. I've never even brought up, because I know that the family members that I have will never acknowledge or admit reality. They will only be enablers of a narrative and of a story that is just not true. But I always speak about how the narcissist will manipulate to get you to step into a role that is not who you really are. It's not your real identity, but they want people to believe it's your real identity. So they use much abuse and hide the abuse in a collapse and control game of passive aggressiveness in order to get a breakdown and in order to cause the affliction and the pain to get the bad reactions. And that is their only determined goal, is they want you to step into that role. And since you naturally are not that role that has been cast for you, they will use abuse and hide the abuse to get you to get bad reactions. And when you give those bad reactions, then, their fantasy and their lies begin to be confirmed. The fantasy that I've been battling against my whole life before I was even a Christian and before I even knew how to get out of the starting blocks, is I'm a hero, I'm a savior, I'm a victim. Those are the three things that my mom has only become in her life. She's never grown, she's never advanced or changed, and she is responsible, but yet wants to make other people who are innocent responsible to clean up her mess. And it's always about the breakdown, the mess, and then transferring that mess onto others for them to carry it. And out of the deep insecurity, it can only be a compare and compete game to win and lose at any cost, at any expense. So the abuse is great. And then it's done to get you to step into a role so that their slander of you and their fantasy can be fulfilled and supported by your bad reactions to their abuse that they hide from everyone. And so there's much abuse with a covert, malignant, narcissistic mother who is very sadistic and only wants domination. She would only try to merge with me as her son to get a breakdown and to cause pain, harm, damage, and loss. And it's all about making you dependent on them so they can take you for a ride. But when I was young, she would involve me in law enforcement. She would pretend that I said and did things that I didn't do when alone, and it became my word against hers. So she was able to manipulate my dad, who I never really had a relationship with, and my brothers, because, by playing the victim in a performance with no guilt, no shame, no remorse for the consequences, and a desire to get others to do her dirty work, to get others to do abuse and violence, all in the name of keeping people safe, all in the name of playing the victim in a professional way and in a deceitful way. So it's always been my word against hers when I was young, and I was always thrown under the bus and put in the middle because she could not share one bit of attention. And she felt in her possessiveness that my dad was her property, that my brothers were her property. And ever since the time I can remember, my mom has tried to use law enforcement, betraying me with a kiss, of course, but trying to use law enforcement as an extension of herself to dominate and to control my life. And for the last 25 years, everywhere I've moved, the police move in, and it's because my family decides to sensationalize me, lie about me, slander me in this gang stalking program, and then get the police to go after me and then sit back and smirk and think it's cute and funny and then tell me privately when nobody's listening, nobody's going to believe you, John. And it's utter destruction. And it becomes this extension. My mom, and her behavior and the way she uses unjust means, by slander, lies, sensationalizing, and calling the local sheriff's office, no matter where I've moved for the last 25 years, and letting them know, insisting that, someone is dangerous and someone's violent and someone wants to hurt them when it's just an act and a performance, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. And it doesn't matter, even with your family member dying, like my dad passed away. There is no remorse or sympathy or empathy, and even that pain will be used to drive the fantasy of being a hero and a savior. And so they like to get a breakdown. They like to use third parties to control you. And really, everywhere I've moved, and this is just a picture of my neighborhood. And when I'm walking in my neighborhood, on both sides of my neighborhood, there are cop cars that are parked, and it seems to me like every single place I've moved for the last 25 years, I move in, and then the police also move in, and then the surveillance and harassment tactics begin. So this is actually a picture of the other sheriff who parks his car in alignment with my window, in alignment with my front door of my home. And so every time I leave, I am being watched or can be seen. And it's all about pretending that you're a threat and pretending that, they need to watch and surveil you to keep things safe. But this is what they do, guys. They move in, and as soon as you move in, maybe a week goes by where you're, breathing a sigh of relief, thinking you got away from the targeting. And then it starts again with all the directed speech, the harassment, the damage to property. It's all done covert and all done to get a bad reaction. So when I speak about my mother, it really shaped me to open my life up to being victimized by others who would do the same behavior. And this is really why I tie the narcissistic abuse in my family and what was done to me when I was young with the police and the tactics that are used in community-based policing. But it's all about lying pathologically. It's all about playing the victim and pretending things happened when they didn't, to try to get a bad reaction, and then to try to get others to do their dirty work. And the police are misused in this fashion by the covert malignant narcissists because they just want to see you in pain. They just want to see you suffer. They don't think you deserve to have independence or autonomy or an individual life. They don't want you to be able to support that. And so they do many mischievous things and really life-threatening and very dangerous things to involve you and wrap up your time, energy, and money in fighting off these abuses to survive. So for the last 25 years, after my mom involving me in deceitful ways with law enforcement, when I was young, it just is a continuation where the extension was the law enforcement, and I never got away. And you can get away physically from the narcissist, but the fact is that you never, in fact, truly get away and really need Christ, because they will pursue you. They will hunt you. And when they can't get your attention on them, then they start behaving in destructive, self-harming, self-sabotaging ways and try to link themselves to you in order to drag you under the mess they create and then transfer that mess onto you to carry, to clean up. And it's all about creating layers of broken in an individual's life and then making that person have to spend their time, energy, and money to try to recover or just try to survive from the pressure and the damage and the harassment that's being done. And they sit back and they rejoice and give you the duper's delight smirk, which is that smirk that they are showing that they are enjoying what they caused. They're enjoying the damage. They're enjoying the harm. So I moved into this place about 4 years ago, and after the first week of thinking that I got away, I never got away. And you don't have to violate the law or break the law. You don't have to do anything wrong. It's all about profile policing and then labeling you and, spreading those rumors and spreading that smear campaign around to justify the surveillance and the tactics that are used in community-based policing. It's hidden abuse, and they have the deniability on their side because they mirror and mimic your movements and then can just pretend like when you complain about it, that it's just some other thing happening, just like typical abusers do. But so I move in and, it's really hard, because every time I go outside, my neighbors come out at the same time as me and go to the mailbox, go to the garbage, go to wash their car, and do all these mirroring activities where you can't get away. And it's designed to let you know you're under surveillance. So I sit in my living room working on my computer and, I snap this picture just to illustrate how close the sheriff's office is to me and how that this particular sheriff has a background in auxiliary policing. And I can break down later what that is and how it relates to community-based policing and how he has a background that is perfect for his physical presence in a neighborhood all the time and to run surveillance and really tactics that are abusive and controlling. And it's all, like I said, not keeping things safe, but it's all meant to get you to react bad, to get you to be self-destructive or destructive to others by the harassment and by the damage that they do. So here's my car down here, and it just shows my place is right here. So you can see that every time I come out of my place right here, I am seen getting in my car. I am seen going on walks. And of course, when they go to their meetings or go to the HOA meeting and integrate with the rest of the community, it's always, bringing dossiers about you and coordinating and organizing the harassment and the following and the tactics that are used. But every time I leave my house, I am seen and can clearly see my car go away, and you can clearly see me coming outside of my home. So, again, just another picture of how close this is to me and how I can't leave or come and go without being monitored, without being watched, and without people approaching me in these forced interactions that I don't want. But it's all designed to occupy all your attention so that you are basically under control because of the sabotage and undermining to all your resources. And then you're forced to spend all your time and energy and money just fighting them off. It's really the hyper game theory. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but each adjustment you make away from the damage to property and the damage to your things and your relationships, that adjustment is also collapsed so that it escalates the contact, therefore escalating the chances for a bad reaction. And that's what they do. And then again, many days I can, sit in my living room, and this is right out of my living room window, and this is another cop car. So sometimes they bring two cop cars and they just sit across from me, literally working me as their job. And that is what they do. And all the tactics, all the techniques that are used are fully being experienced by me. But I can move into a place, and then my family, who is at the root of all of the abuse, will contact the local sheriff's office and let them know where I am, what I'm doing. And then the gang stalking starts again and begins again. But you can see that it's always about positioning themselves in the line of sight, and I'm sure, they record from their cars. I'm sure that they have directed energy weapons and different things that they use as they just nonchalantly park their cars in my line of sight. So you notice, you can see every time I leave in this car right here, every time I go, that I am visible, so I can't have privacy. I can't get away. And there's nothing that I can do about it besides pray to the Lord Jesus. But I'm sitting in my living room, basically taking a picture just to illustrate how close and how they position themselves to always be able to see. And this is another cop car beside the cop car that I showed in the other pictures. But this is all about a physical presence to so-called deter crime, but it really has nothing to do with that. You are labeled, you are profiled, you are considered a threat and a danger if you can still think for yourself. And then the punishment is meted out to you with no due process. So here again is just my car. And you can see this is the front door of my place right here on this building. And when I come out to my car or come out and walk, I am being watched. Every single move that I make can be seen. And they do that to make the stalking and the harassment, those that are participating, it's much easier to, notify others when you're coming out of your house or when you're in your house, because that is when they start to hit your body with directed energy weapons and, slowly eliminate you in the long game process of collapse and control. And once they get you isolated and once they get you in your home, most people think, well, your home, it's the safest place for me to be. And I don't want to go out because of the hostility that's engineered in a fake way around you. But you start to think that, you start to feel that burden of just wanting to stay in your house, because every time you go out, people come and go with you at the same time of the day, no matter what you do. There is always a presence of these stalkers engaging you in a hostile way. And so I just wanted to illustrate the proximity and how often this officer is parking his car in this spot. And he doesn't even live on this side, guys. He lives on the back side of this condo. So basically, you know, he is doing his duty, he feels, and working his job by community-based policing and auxiliary policing, having a visible presence in the neighborhood, running the slander and the smear campaigns that, you know, as a targeted individual, we're dangerous, we're crazy, you know, we abuse children, and the slander goes on and on and on. And many family members and relatives and people that were close to us end up becoming participants through recruitment, through bribes, through promises, through gifts, and many other things. And if they don't go along with it, then they're threatened. Okay. And obviously they approach people like, you know, you just want to keep people safe, don't you? I mean, you could be a hero and a savior in the community. And so they really play off this narcissism that's prevailed in society today, where people only are do-gooders pretending to be a hero and a savior, but they never investigate anything. They never really look past the surface level. And it's led to 25 years, every single place I've lived. The police move in, and then I'm followed either by an officer or followed by an informant, in which they systematically have techniques and methods in order to what they call neutralize the target. And that just means eliminate you and make it look like an accident, make it look like you're doing it to yourself or you're just unstable. And that is why, you know, your car is keyed, and that is why they put sugar in the gas tank. That's why, because you're just unstable. That's why, you know, there's so much property damage, because after all, you're just unstable doing it to yourself. And that's what they like to say. But you can see, again, just the line of sight from my place to his and from my car to his. And that every single time I leave my house or even step out of my house, they have the neighbors step out with me in a parallel, coordinated, and organized way, in which the tactics begin of mirroring and mimicking and directed speech and gaslighting and doing all the things they do to get a bad reaction, to justify the surveillance, to justify the abuse, because any reaction you give, of course, to this kind of negative abuse will be seen as evidence that you are guilty, that you are bad, and they are so good. And they're just there keeping things safe and wanting to save lives. But here's a close-up picture of just the car that I'm speaking about, the police officer car. And again, another picture of another police officer sitting here and in my line of sight. And this is the way it has been for the last 25 years. I move in, then the police move in, and then the gang stalking starts. So for many of us, we don't have it at this level. You know, some people are targeted less, some people are targeted more. But for me, I can't even breathe or swallow my spit without one interruption after the next, without one crisis after the next that is manufactured and created, whether it's to property, to my jobs, to my relationships, to whatever it means, whatever they have to go after to fully dominate and control the target. That's what they'll do. And it's all done with deniability. I say probable deniability because, you know, it assumes that when I go to the mail, the person that's following me is just going to the mail as well. And they're just checking the mail. But when you go to the mailbox 10 times and the same neighbor comes out and follows you to that mailbox and snickers at you and pretends like they're checking their mail too, making directed speech comments, mentioning things you said in private again and again and again in a mocking, provoking way, that is directed speech. That's a tactic of policing and run by the Threat Fusion Centers, which is an amalgamation of all the different branches of the government in your local community. And, you know, there is so much funding for the local sheriff's office, at least where I'm at. You can see the different funding grant programs that they get to run this type of training and policing, which is communist style policing. It's literally, they create this proxy army of people in civilians in regular clothes, the do-gooders, I say all the time, because they never question anything. And usually it's covert and malignant narcissists who are willing to sacrifice you and do whatever it takes just to have nice things in this life. So I just wanted to mention this, guys, that this is what I deal with every day. Just from my living room window, you can clearly see that there is always this being watched. So guys, with the community-based policing, we can go to the U.S. Department of Justice and we can see that there's a lot of funding and grant money that's given to the local sheriff's office, no matter where you are in the country. And the Department of Justice offers funding opportunities to support law enforcement and public safety activities. And that includes, tactics of community-based policing. And many of us are targeted individuals. We live under this day in and day out. And there's so much support for this under the terror laws by just profiling you and labeling you and then meting out the punishment to you. But there are many tactics, and this is how they do it. This is how they get the funding. And it's to assist, quote unquote, victims of crime and to provide training and technical assistance to conduct research and implement programs that improve the criminal, civil, and juvenile justice systems. Okay, but we know that that's not what's going on. They're not improving anything. They're just taking their power and control and misusing it in the name of keeping people safe. But this is justice.gov, okay, the Department of Justice. And there are all kinds of grant programs that you can go on and see. But here we have the justice grant system. This is called Just Grants, as you can see. And you can go in and you can click on all this and log in and read about all the funding for community-based policing. But the grants management system of the Office of Community-Orientated Policing, COPS, which is another name for gang stalking, but this is the tactics and the training that they use. But the Office of Justice Programs, OJP, and the Office of Violence Against Women, OVW. And so, like, if you have a covert, malignant, narcissistic mother who wants to compete at any price, at any cost, and is so infantile and so immature and hasn't grown up and only can see life in terms of winning and losing because they need to be superior, they need to be above you and have the control over you, well, then, this office gets involved and they use this office as a way to, kind of analyze a person in order to target a person. But that's a whole other topic. But we know that covert, malignant narcissists who are sadistic, they only love pain and they love to see you in pain. And that is why they do the breakdown game, collapsing your resources. And speaking of resources, the Just Grants resource website is an entryway into information about Just Grants and the system itself. Through this portal, both award recipients and applicants can access training resources, as you see, support operations, frequently asked questions. And so anybody can go and look at this. But this is all about supporting communities after mass violence incidents, which is really not what they're doing with the money. They're basically going after innocent people through profile policing. And we can see that the DOJ program plan is a tool to help applicants find funding opportunities. So they advertise to the local sheriff's office. But this is the main one that I'm looking at here today. This is COPS, or Community-Orientated Policing Services. So the Office of Community-Orientated Policing Service is responsible for advancing the practice of community policing by nation, state, local, territorial, and tribal law enforcement agencies through information and grant resources. So this is how they get the money and to, really in the name of keeping people safe, labeling you as a threat and then going after you as a quote unquote terrorist or religious extremist or whatever they label you as, a danger to the community. But the COPS office here awards grants to hire community policing professionals, you see. And that is what we complain about as targeted individuals. It is these professionals who are skilled at gaslighting, skilled at property damage, skilled at breaking in your home with no forced entry, all allowed by the Department of Justice. And that's why many targets, when they complain and they seek to go to law enforcement does not take those complaints and actually will, rather come with a wellness visit to make sure you're mentally stable. That's what they do. And so I wouldn't recommend complaining to law enforcement about these kind of tactics because they are told not to tell anybody about it. And there is a non-disclosure agreement that they make people sign who are a part of this abuse. And they provide training and technical assistance to community members, local government leaders, and all levels of law enforcement. But so you click in onto the grants program, and as the leading proactive policing experts at the U.S. Department of Justice, the COPS office has invested over $20 billion in policing since Congress established the office in 1994. So this is how your targeting occurs and the funding behind it. And through these grant programs, you can actually see what departments, what sheriff's offices in your local community receive funding. And, obviously where I live, it receives funding. And there's critical resources that might help communities address emerging challenges. So it doesn't even have to be that you've broken the law or committed a crime. There is proactive policing. So emerging challenges means that they're going to cut you off at the pass. And that is why many of us complain about these tactics being used to isolate, to destroy, and to silently erase our freedom, our liberty, and our autonomy. And they are there to enhance community safety, because all abuse is always done in the name of keeping people safe, and promote effective collaborative policing. That means working with members in your neighborhood, working with members in the community. So there's all these award lists that you can see and you can go look at. And these are the program names. So we can see that there is much funding, COPS hiring program, coordinated tribal assistance solicitation, Blue Alert program, COPS anti methamphetamine program. So, and then of course they have all these ones that are in respect to, drugs and things of that nature, keeping the community safe. But this mainly is the one that we're dealing with here when it comes to community-based policing. And when it comes to all these different programs, and there's even deadline dates. So community policing development, micro grants program, community policing development, law enforcement products and resources. And this is where they get the money to get military grade weapons, silent weapon systems for silent domination and control and harassment. And there's all sorts of money available. So I just wanted to show this on this website, and anybody can go in and click and see that their local sheriff's office is getting this money to do these tactics. And there's many training materials and many other such things that real targets complain about. And, I used to tell my family before they started to participate in the abuse that I was being followed, my property was being damaged, and here's the video of it. And strangely, they act so sheepish and they don't want to acknowledge or admit the damage being done because they're participating in it. That's what I've found. It's not because they don't get you or the video proof that you show them. So that is the problem. Again, it's cops at usdoj.gov, and anybody can go on here and see if their local sheriff's office is collecting money, and the program deadlines are below. And of course, there are many programs that we have seen, and the sheriff's office gets awarded all this money, and then they get the training and everything else from the Department of Justice to gaslight, to break your property, to break in your house with no forced entry, and to move furniture around to let you know that you're under surveillance, that you're being watched, and many other such tactics. And you can go and look at the award management documents and actually see what local community you're living in, and if there is funding and money and training for the local sheriff's office to mete out this kind of punishment against innocents. It's all proactive policing, meaning you don't have to commit a crime. You don't have to do anything wrong. You are just profiled, studied, and surveilled and labeled, and then the punishment starts happening. So we have the local sheriff's office involved in community-based policing as the organizers, as the coordinators of this type of policing that's used in the neighborhood. And there are many tactics involved. And this is basically the police officer that lives across the street from me. And this is just a PDF of his background, just to illustrate that his background is, in fact, related to community-based type policing and would be a perfect fit. And that's why, I never see his car go away, because you'd think you'd have to go to a job and work. But if your job is in the local community as a visible deterrent and presence continually, that is your job, in fact. So you're not going to work because you're working all the time in my local neighborhood. But so this is the cop who parks his car near mine and came to live actually in the building across from mine in the line of my sight daily. And so here he is. And his name is Nicholas Cittadino. And he went to Boston, Massachusetts, United States for school. And here's his breakdown of 2018. He was an auxiliary police officer. And really, that's the name of the community members that are not deputized to be full police officers, but carry out like informant type behavior and community-based policing tactics. But so he was an auxiliary police officer at Cambridge Police Department. And then 2019, he was a paralegal. And then 2015 to 19, academic assistant. But so he went to New England law. He's a doctor of jurisprudence, which is a pretty good accomplishment. Boston University. And then we have, New England Law Enforcement Training Center Police Academy is where he went. But here is where I am kind of breaking down and looking at what these terms mean, because this is on his resume. This is his background. So Nicholas Cittadino skills are as follows, corrections. So working in a correction facility, cold calling. So, and lead generation. And we're going to define these terms in relationship to law enforcement terms, because they mean something else other than what the common person would think. So cold calling, lead generation. Then we have Salesforce. So what is he selling.com? It's not anything that you would think. It's, selling and promoting proactive policing tactics is really what that means, but we'll get into that. And then demand generation. Okay. These are terms that his background is related to. And we'll talk about demand generation, sales process, direct sales, inside sales, and solution selling. Okay. And so all these terms are really important, but we can see the summary of what he did. And an auxiliary police officer is a trained volunteer or part-time member of a police department who supports sworn officers by handling routine, non-hazardous duties, serving as the extra quote unquote eyes and ears in the community. So this is part of his background and why I have complained about the organization and the coordination of tactics that are used being a targeted individual, but they don't carry the same authority as a full-time officer, of course. But what a perfect person to train other members of the community when he has a background in this, to train other members of the community to quote unquote keep public safety, but also is very skilled at community engagement. So we have his core responsibilities and what those would be as an auxiliary police officer before he became a police officer. So there's patrols, so walking, biking, and how many of us, we complain that when we go on a walk, we're interrupted by hostility and people that speak to us things that we've only said in the privacy of our own home and repeat it back to us in a mocking, harassing way to try to get a bad reaction. So whether you're walking, driving, on a bike, or putting your patrol vehicle in residential, commercial, and transient areas. So that's why there is a police car parked across from my place, because it's all about this idea of creating deterrence in proactive policing and treating you like you're a criminal when you've done nothing wrong, when you've broken no laws. And so, but this monitoring is done in the local community, and he has a background in this. So monitoring subway entrances, housing developments, and public spaces are really the expertise that he has. And observation and reporting, watch for suspicious activity, which is always generated by the hidden covert abuse that they do in their tactics of community-based policing, because your rights are suspicious. Your freedom of movement is suspicious. Your right to a jury and trial by your peers is suspicious. You know what I mean? So they want to make lawful, normal behavior that's legal, suspicious activity to justify the surveillance and the harassment. So, and trying to build a reason for police response of this nature, that's what they do. So rely on information, information to sworn officers rather than intervening directly. And this is where community members are recruited in this auxiliary policing format in order to police you and be the eyes and the ears of the community to go back to the law enforcement officers that manage this kind of thing in our local communities. But so his background is also in crowd and traffic control. So assist during parades, festivals, sporting events, and emergencies. It's pretty self-explanatory. Direct traffic and maintain order at large gatherings. But this is the part that I look into with the community engagement. Act as a visible presence to deter crime and reassure residents. Okay. So when you have family members or people that don't like you, complaining about you, slandering you, doing the smear campaigns, calling the local sheriff's office all the time in an obsessed way because they got to win and you got to lose. And, they're just telling the sheriff's office, you're so dangerous, you're so crazy, you're mentally ill. And then they snicker about it when they're done and they get third parties like law enforcement and get off on the power and the enjoyment that they have in getting law enforcement to do abuse to innocent people. But that's what my family has decided to do for the last 25 years. But they're always a presence in the community, like you've seen in the videos I've shown with the cop car being parked across. That is his cop car. So he can always see my coming and going. But it's always this presence to help build trust between the public and the police department. That's their goal, and that's what they're always working on. So they handle routine tasks that free sworn officers for complex law enforcement duties. So this is what he was doing before he became a deputized officer, but like filing reports, assisting at precinct desks, and supporting public safety campaigns. And really that's what we've shown with the DOJ funding and how they, look to those materials and how to keep the community safe through gang stalking, through cause stalking, through abuse and harassment to keep the target in a constant state of having to engage and survive the damage and the abuse that's done. And they do it all to control. So there are authority limits before he became an officer, but he is an expert at getting civilians and unarmed people and typically unpaid volunteers, but they can be paid and they are paid, as we saw with the grants program, to participate in the abuse and the surveillance where, he might go to an HOA meeting and tell the members of the community, we need to keep the community safe from John, and he's dangerous, he's out of control, and then bring fake dossiers to encourage others to do the surveillance and the abuse that is overt in nature. It's meant for you to know. It's meant for you to realize that there is no freedom, that you're watched 24/7. So before he was involved in true deputized policing and carrying a firearm and everything else, he was part of auxiliary policing, which really you can't carry a firearm. In some rare jurisdictions, you can with special authorization. And like I said, some of the tactics used against me are, encircling me every time I drive with red cars to sensitize me, and then, rolling down their dark black tinted windows and brandishing a firearm again and again in a repeated way every time you go out, showing you their guns and aiming them at you to make sure that you are in your house being hit by directed energy weapons, that you never want to go outside because of the level of hostility that they manufacture around the target. But so the neighborhood members that are involved in this auxiliary type policing operate under the direction of full-time police officers. So really a summary of auxiliary police officers are volunteer or part-time civic members who extend the reach of law enforcement by patrolling, observing, reporting and assisting with public events. They provide valuable support, but their role is a non-enforcement focused, ensuring sworn officers can concentrate on critical policing tasks. So they are usually, with a background like this, are managing the members of the community who agree together to hide the abuse and then do this abuse, trying to make the target look crazy and unstable by the reactions that they provoke. And then they can justify and say, see, I told you he was crazy, when they damage your property and hide the abuse and try to get a reaction. So there is much policing in Florida, and the Florida Auxiliary Policing is, I took this from their website, but it's not a standalone village program, but part of a broader Florida system of auxiliary law enforcement officers and the Florida Highway Patrol Auxiliary. So these are really trained volunteers who support sworn officers with limited authority, always under supervision. But what auxiliary policing means in Florida is basically there is this statewide framework, and Florida law defines auxiliary law enforcement officers as volunteers who assist with certified police or sheriff's deputies, and they are recognized under the Florida Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. And this is where I get into a lot of the training that is given, where we can see the very tactics that us targets complain about are in their training materials. But if you notice, they have to complete a 360-hour certificate program covering law enforcement basics, vehicle operations, and this is where they learn how to harass a target and come and go with the target at the same time, no matter what time of the day they come and go, and drive in reckless and dangerous ways around the target to involve the target in an accident even. They have been known to do that with many targets and me, where they deliberately run into your car, they deliberately encircle you and brake check you and get behind you and tail you at the same time, and then encircle you and drive you off the road. But there are many tactics and much training that's involved in these operations under national security. So they are able to get away with it and then just declare national security so that it can't be investigated. There are a lot of tactics and firearm safety training, but they cannot carry firearms or operate vehicles until completing additional high liability training. So most of the people that follow you in their cars are professionals. They have learned how to do these tactics, coming and going with you and harassing you and throwing things at your car and driving their car into you. And people wouldn't even believe the amount of times that I've been into a store and came out and my car was hit and damaged. And it's all done deliberately, intentionally, with no break, so that it's crisis after crisis after crisis, therefore taking all the time, energy, and money away from the target to have to redirect it so the target can't take care of themselves. But you want to get away and you try to get away, but then they collapse that escape and force these interactions only. So for people that say, well, just get away and just ignore it, you can't do that, because what they target are your means of survival. So, and I just kind of go through, some of the support that an auxiliary police officer provides in neighborhoods usually. And the FHP Auxiliary is a statewide volunteer program. This is for when they are driving, they're training these volunteers, and all in the name of public safety. That's how all this abuse is done. And they assist these civilians in regular clothes with operational support. So they sometimes wear uniforms, patrol with troopers, and may help. This is still about auxiliary policing and traffic enforcement, DUI checkpoints, and emergency responses, but always under supervision. And so auxiliary policing operates under statewide auxiliary officer framework and Florida Highway Patrol Auxiliary. So this is why we complain about being followed everywhere we go, because we are followed everywhere we go. And it's all designed to mirror and mimic the target's actions and then to try to provoke a response. So, and then, of course, below is the Department of Justice link. And I've shown this before, but this is strictly with the Lee County Sheriff's Office. And they get grant money from the DOJ to target members of the community, which is gang stalking, harassment, and community-based policing. And so the department participates, and this is justice.gov. I put the link there for anybody to go look at that page and see the grants program to do these horrific abuses to innocent civilians through proactive policing, labeling you, and then meting out the punishment. So even though where I live, Lee County is the sheriff's office. They have no private police department. So the actual sheriff's office is the one that receives the DOJ COPS community orientated policing grants. Okay. And there are federal grants that go to the incorporated village of the town that I live in and the local sheriff's office. So the COPS, it's called, is the acronym, but the Office of Community Orientated Policing is responsible for advancing the practice of community policing by nation, state, local, territorial. And we've gone over this before about what they they're doing. Okay. So I just put together this short PDF for people to see that my officer and his background that has been, really assigned to me has the background in his basic resume, and we are looking at these types of skill sets that he has. And, auxiliary policing, it really refers to like a trained civilian. So he's an expert at training other civilians to volunteer for the police department and to do these kind of things that I've been complaining about. So they support sworn officers by taking on non-enforcement duties that increase visibility, reduce his workload, and strengthen community-based policing. So they do not have arrest powers like the other people that target and follow me and harass me and damage my property, but they have the above the law status and become a force multiplier, basically. So you are surrounded by these perps that do this. But, I really think that it's like, when I look at his skill set, look at his duties, and look at cop language or police officer language. So really, I wanted to say that, this auxiliary policing means, patrol support. It means conducting neighborhood and business and community patrols and acting as extra eyes and ears for other deputies and for other members of the community, and reporting suspicious activity, which is always, the target is coming and going, and that becomes suspect, you know what I mean? Because they're trying to reduce your autonomy so that they can control after they've profiled, policed you, and pretended that you're a threat to the community wherever you go. And then they make that excuse to keep things safe. They're going to do all these tactics to neutralize you and stop you from your basic activity and from even taking care of yourself. So they extend basically the agency or law enforcement's presence without, requiring really sworn manpower. So that's what these officers like this do in a neighborhood. And, it's really, like I said, there's special event support and even involved in traffic control, but it's all about, providing risk management, and monitoring, like I've complained about the red and white cars that wait for me outside of my gate every time I leave to come and go with me, monitoring entry, exit points, and assisting with other kinds of protocols and tasks. But they handle the low risk but high visibility tasks that keep the community safe. And so your HOA board might hire a local law enforcement member to live in the community and to run this kind of policing. But there's a lot of administrative and clerical support, like data entry, phone calls, front desk assistance, helping with community program paperwork, and supporting detectives or admin staff with non-sensitive tasks. But they reduce administrative load so other real police officers can do this. And he is in fact a real police officer now, but this is just his background that I'm covering. But it's all about the community engagement and having a background to be trained in that, representing the agency at different outreach events and providing crime prevention materials, supporting neighborhood watch programs. That's all a part of what his background is involved in. And they help to build trust, basically, and communication with other members in your community. But little do you know that they're also, creating this sensationalization around the target in a slander smear campaign in proactive policing terms. They are getting other members of the community to follow you, to harass you, to damage your property, and to do all these provoking things with above the law status so that you react and then they're ready to arrest you. And, they do a lot of, business checks or vacation home checks, and they assist with, different safety surveys that they put out in the community. Little do you know, as a targeted individual, that the other members of your community are being approached by this officer, or whatever officer is in your community if you're at this level of targeting. But they're all about, getting other people to report environmental risks, and vehicles, and you just happen to become the suspect that everybody is watching. And so the real meaning behind some of his skill set is to, identify problems before they become calls for service. And that's really what community-based policing is all about, assisting other sworn officers in, grid searches and providing manpower for large area canvassing and relaying information and maintaining perimeter and visibility is, what they do as an auxiliary police officer, and having a background that fits with the community-based policing tactics that I've experienced here. But they go door to door and canvass neighborhoods for information after supposed incidents, and distribute flyers and BOLO information, that's BOLO information. And they're always documenting observations for sworn follow-ups, and they help gather intel quickly when time matters. So, and so the property and evidence assistance is basically another function, and basically picking up found property or transporting non-sensitive items, assisting with inventory or logging under supervision. They handle low-risk tasks that, keep evidence rooms running smoothly, basically. And so we can see that they are there to increase safety, so they say, and a presence without requiring sworn officers. So this is what he did in his background. And they, do disaster and emergency support. And so it really gets down to, these law enforcement definitions here with his skill set. And having a background where you work inside jails, prisons, and detention facilities, supervising inmates, maintaining safety, enforcing rules, conducting searches, monitoring movement, and preventing contraband, or writing reports, documenting incidents, and coordinating with the courts, managing high-stress environments with de-escalation and control. So that is his background. And a corrections trained officer, understands custody and compliance and behavior patterns, so there's a lot of cold calling, as you see. And this definition is much different than you think when it comes to law enforcement legalese and language. But cold calling and having a background like this in law enforcement terms is really proactively contacting individuals who did not request police contact, okay? And this is by definition, following up on leads, witnesses, victims in your community. And when you've got Karens everywhere complaining about you, welcome to the jungle, baby, because that's, what usually it is. And then you end up becoming a target. But this can include phone calls, door knocks, or in-person outreach, which is done by meeting with other members of your community behind your back. And it's, really cold calling is used heavily in investigations, community-based policing, and intel gathering. So that's what I have experienced, at least since I've moved to this new location. And like I said, for the last 25 years, my family has been instrumental in promoting a narrative that endangers my life and will not stop, no matter what the price, no matter what happens. They can never admit and acknowledge what they've done to my life and hijacking my autonomy and forcing me to have to deal with what they've done every day. But officers in practice, will use cold calling to generate information, verify stories, and build cases. So there's a lot of lead generation. And that's really when he identifies new information that may solve crimes and prevent future ones. So there's always this proactive policing. You don't have to commit a crime. But turning community tips, observations, or patterns into actionable leads. That's what they do with lead generation, and documenting, prioritizing, and forwarding, leads to detectives or units. So in practice, this is the investigative backbone, really finding the thread that unravels a case. And lead generation is done by what they're trained to do in community-based policing. And we see salesforce.com, and really the law enforcement version of what that means is not literal sales, but it translates to case management and software proficiency. So using digital systems to track cases, contacts, reports, and follow-up. So his background is in managing workflow, documentation, interactions, and organizing investigative data, and ensuring information is searchable, shareable, and audit ready. So in practice, really officers who can use systems like Salesforce, excel at documentation, organization, and really case trafficking. So, and then we have demand generation, and that demand generation is really in policing terms, creating new police work. So it's not waiting for a crime to happen. They create new police work through proactive activity. And this is where the harassment and the damage to property and the break-ins and the getting other members of the community really takes place. So they basically are trained to identify crime trends before calls even come in. Okay, so this is what they're trained to do. And this is what policing has become in America. And it could be conducting traffic stops, field interviews, business checks, or home checks, spotting suspicious activity that they just label as suspicious, which it's not, and initiating an investigation. So they're always trying to get the target to react, because if you react bad and respond to the abuse in a normal, healthy way, well, that just gives them permission to initiate an investigation and excuse the fact that they're doing all these tactics and hiding the abuse that they're doing to us. But that is what his background is all about, and generating new cases through proactive patrol. So in practice, really demand generation officer really doesn't wait for calls. They create opportunities to prevent crime by definition. So this is his background. And we see B2B. So that means just business to business, agency to agency. So his skill set in law enforcement is interagency collaboration. So, working with other departments, task forces, federal agencies, and local partners, and sharing intelligence, coordinating operations, and aligning strategies to be met out against the target. And so, like I said, you don't have to commit a crime. This is proactive policing, where they profile you and then go after you. And so this is what my family has participated in and has been instrumental in making me and forcing me to spend the last 25 years of my life going from home to home. I move in, then the police move in, and the games begin. But, they're there to build professional relationships with other members of the community that improve case outcomes. So that is part of their practice. So the officer knows how to work across jurisdictions and build cooperative networks. And we see things like Salesforce. So this is his skill set on his resume. But, this becomes basically, in law enforcement terms, the investigative process. So it's really about identifying a problem, gathering information, interviewing all involved parties, which become the perps, the gang stalkers that are used to harass us, and become the eyes and the ears for the law enforcement officer, and then presenting findings, securing buy-in from victims, witnesses, and community partners, and then closing a case. So I'm just showing that his background is geared towards community-based policing and working as a liaison between the community and other members of the community who participate in this type of harassment and abuse. So it's structured workflow from first contact to solution to resolution. So there's a great structured workflow in this. And then we see direct sales. So this just means in the law enforcement version, it basically translates to direct community engagement. So that means face-to-face communication with citizens, build rapport quickly. This is what they're trained in. And then explaining actions and gaining cooperation and reducing resistance. So persuading people to comply, provide information, or accept resources and solutions, which usually means eliminating the target and making it look like they're mentally ill or mentally unstable. So officers use direct sales quote unquote skills every time they knock on a door or talk somebody down, so it's really also inside sales. The law enforcement version is, it really becomes, the desk-based investigative work and being trained in that. So phone interviews, follow-up calls, case management, coordinating with agencies, victims, so-called, and witnesses, so-called, because they manufacture and create the witnesses against the target in agreed upon, organized and coordinated way, and then running background checks, records, and digital leads. So in practice, the behind the scenes work is there for this officer that keeps the case moving, keeps the investigation ongoing so that they can have an excuse to undermine, sabotage, and destroy everything in the target's life, because after all, they're just keeping things safe. So there's a lot of solution selling, and I just wanted to end with this. With the solution selling and the law enforcement version of that term in his background, well, this is problem-solving policing. So diagnosing the real underlying issues behind a call or behind a complaint, and then matching the right resource to the right problem, and then creating long-term solutions instead of quick fixes. So getting community buy-in so the solution sticks. And that's really what community-based policing grants are done for, is because they are then, by that money and training and all the tactics that they do, able to neutralize a target by destroying property, gaslighting, undermining, and always having the deniability that they are the ones doing the damage and the abuse. And they hide the abuse and continue to get other members of the community to respond. So I just wanted to show this PDF that I created of his background and kind of break down some of the terms of the officer that parks his car across from me. And I also wanted to show some of the reported tactics in the gang stalking complaints. So what I go through is color sensitizing. So it's basically the repeated use of specific colors, clothing, cars, objects to trigger or to harass the target. Street theater, staged conversations or skits in public meant to intimidate or send coded messages to the target. Directed speech. We've heard this term before. Strangers, really, truly strangers, making comments that seem personally relevant or targeted directly to the individual. And they like to, mock and snicker and laugh and chuckle because they know when you complain about it that they can just deny everything. And they're only going to do abuse to the target that can be denied. So it's very well thought out abuse and coming and going at the same time. So neighbors or strangers leaving, arriving exactly when the target does, creating a sense of surveillance. That's what they want, whether they're really surveilling you or not. The whole point is, as they mimic and mirror your activity, you're going to feel like everybody is surveilling you. And that's the whole point, all in the name of deterring crime that could potentially happen, so it's all based on no evidence, no proof, no due process, and just meting out the punishment to neutralize the potential threats. As we saw in the grant program, that is the language that they use. So intercepts, I have this all the time, intercepts. So that means crossing my path and people deliberately crossing the target's path or blocking their movement, slowing you down, getting in your way. and laughing and chuckling about it and thinking it's cute and funny. We have many noise campaigns. So these are just a few of the tactics that they use and part of their training material, but repeated loud sounds, car alarms, horns, sirens, banging, and it's all timed to the target's activities. Like when you go to sleep, all of a sudden the car alarms will all start going off all at the same time. And day after day, day after day, in a repeated way to break your will, to break your will. So, and then there's vehicle harassment, as we've complained about before, cars following, circling, or parking. You know, you'll pull into a parking lot and the parking lot will be empty. And next thing you know, red and white cars will be pulling in next to you and encircling you. But this is all run by the threat fusion centers. They know where you're going to be. They're using surveillance tools that allow them to be where you are going before you even get there. So, and they're parking, can be in front of your home, where they just mob you in front of your home. So you're looking out your window and it's just nothing but red and white cars and people pointing up at you and laughing and trying to take pictures of you and stuff like that to get a bad reaction. But even in your home, so there's no respect whatsoever. There is no break from this kind of harassment, whether you're at home, on foot, or driving, or going out. And it's always near the target. It's always done near the target. So, and then there's crowding or blocking, like groups gathering around or obstructing the target in public spaces. This happens a lot to me in grocery stores. You know, you go to check out and there's no line behind you. You look back and there's 25 people. The whole store needs to check out at the same time as you. And, you know, of course, they've got somebody breathing down your neck and, you know, putting their items mixed with your items. And, you know, you can't even check out without peace. It's all hostility. It's all designed to provoke and get a reaction. And there's plenty of funding for them to be trained on it, how to do these tactics. There's a lot of mimicry, as I've said, strangers imitating the target's behavior, gestures, or clothing. And I've shown this before with different people that have been there mirroring my activity. I've shown that in other videos. But the electronic harassment, you know, these are complaints of interference with phones, computers, and appliances, and breaking those things, stopping the use of those things, and frustrating the target so the target has no voice and can never complain to the right people about what's going on or get any support. There's a lot of symbolic cues like hand signals, gestures, facial expressions that are uniform, where you see 10 out of 10 people and those 10 out of 10 people are flicking you off, doing the same look on their face. It's all coordinated and organized. These are coded actions to suggest to the target that you're under surveillance and to let you know in a overt fashion. So many of us will be surveilled for many years and not even know that we're being watched. And then one day the light switch flicks on and there are signals and gestures, and family and friends will do many coded actions that speak to the fact that we are under surveillance, and they like it, they enjoy it, they smirk, they smile, they rejoice at knowing everything about us, but we know nothing about these perps that are targeting us, and they like it that way. It is an unjust scale or balance that they like to create, and frustration. But then, of course, when we go out in public, there's always the flash mobs. I get this a lot when I cross streets. You know, they want me to be afraid and have a complex when I cross the street because cars will bump into me. You know, red and white cars will pull up to the stop sign, beep their horn at me, bump into me really lightly, or just block, you know, my path of walking so that you have to, you know, walk around the red car, and, you know, they'll flick you off. They'll act like you're the problem. But so it's like these flash mob style encounters happen a lot for me at intersections and when I go into stores. But this sudden coordinated appearances of multiple people around the target, this happens a lot. Just when I look out my window and, you know, I'm looking out wondering, should I go get the mail because I'm going to be followed when I go get the mail, or wash my car, or go take out the garbage. And the same person is going to be there parallel to me, side by side with me. And they're going to try to provoke. They're going to try to get a bad reaction. And that's the name of the game. Once you react bad, well, then they win and you lose. And that becomes the evidence to run a deeper smear campaign against the target. There's all these staged coincidences, you know, repeated chance, quote unquote, encounters with the same individuals in different locations. So you could go across the neighborhood and you're bumping into the same person that's your neighbor that comes out of the house at the same time as you. And then you go to the store and they're at the store and you see them in the same aisle as you and you see them checking out at the same time as you. And of course, they're following the target around in these kind of cases to pretend to be a victim of the target, to create a scene and to get other people and the perps, try to get other people to target you in stores by screaming, yelling, raising their hands, calling you names and saying, we need to keep things safe. This guy's a criminal. This guy's dangerous. So everywhere you go, you are embarrassed and then never want to go to those places to meet your own personal needs again. So you can't even really go shopping for your basic needs because these stalkers will follow you and park around you, parallel to you at whatever store you're going to, and then wait for you to get out of your car and then come in and mirror your movement within the store and try to take what's in your hands even, when you're reaching for an item and you got somebody parallel to you and in fact, a neighbor to you, and they just happen to go to the store at the same time as you, reach for the same item as you, check out at the same time as you, and get in their car at the same time as you, and get out of their car at the same time as you. This is too much to be coincidence. Many of us go through this on a nonstop basis, but gang stalkers do this all the time, perps. And we often complain about the patterns of coordinated behavior, colors, timing, speech, noise, and staged encounters that feel deliberately orchestrated to unsettle and intimidate. So they might take pictures of your car like they do often. And other officers who did not do this to me, get other neighbors to participate in this kind of organized harassment and stalking with all the tactics that I have listed above. So this is just a picture out of my front door window as to how close I'm being watched and surveilled. And of course, they park white and red cars in front of my window all the time, just so that I can never feel peace. Here's another police officer parked outside my window in line of sight. So they're always parked in a way that can always see me leave my front door or my side door. And this is just a pic of the backside of the condo where he actually lives right here. So, but the cars are all designed to deter crime. But this is Nicholas Cittadino. I just wanted to share his background, share some things about why I believe that there is an orchestrated coordinated tactics out of the very training manuals, and that the sheriff's office here is getting the funding from the grants program, the COPS DOJ Department of Justice program, to train their officers to manage this kind of thing. And his background is identical to what would be needed as an ex-auxiliary police officer, community-based, community-orientated police officer, to indirectly harass and control and abuse as they do. There are many police officers who just participate in this, and the Fusion Center that handles these assessments through a structured flow of information gathering, analysis, and dissemination to their local partners at the Lee County Sheriff's Office. So all of this is done in the dark, and you are considered and labeled a terrorist and a threat to justify eliminating you through a slow kill process. And it is killing you. It is eliminating you, cutting off the target from the means they have to support themselves and their lives and their autonomy, independence, and identity, and then providing only an opportunity for you to step into the role that they've cast for you. Meanwhile, manipulating the other members of the community that they're here to keep you safe and save lives, and convincing other people that their abuse is actually good. So I just wanted to share this. I love you guys. God bless.